Hi everyone, my name is Angela Colson and today I'll be presenting my research proposal on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander bereavement and fair work practice. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land on which I am presenting today, the Dharawal speaking people, and I pay respect to elders past, present and future. So by way of introduction, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people call their cultural bereavement practice sorry business. And a really important part of understanding the basis for this research is the knowledge that for the ATSI population, sorry business can extend outside of loss that's just due to death, and it can incorporate other losses like loss of land, incarceration, removal of children, and loss of culture and suicide. It's important for these losses to be resolved in a healthy way. Given that culture is an important part of that process for the ATSI population, there's very negative outcomes for those who have unresolved grief or for those who are disengaged with their culture. ATSI people have a broader understanding of family and also a broader understanding of grief and bereavement. And this means that they're often experiencing higher rates of sorry business than their non-Indigenous counterparts in Australia. So under current workplace legislation, all full-time workers, including ATSI people, are permitted to have 2 days compassionate leave. However, to participate in sorry business, ATSI workers will have to often travel to country and complete obligations from a cultural perspective that have no particular set time frame. And given that they're also experiencing higher rates of bereavement, it's possible that these cultural and legislative factors are actually forcing ATSI workers to take leave without pay or miss out on cultural obligations as a result. There's not a lot of research in this area, unfortunately, in Australia, but the research that we do have is very interesting and informative. So in 2019, research by Opie, Gibson, Thorpe, Lees and Haynes investigated sustainable employment practices for ATSI workers. And in that research, they found that cultural commitment to sorry business was really important and that some people would actually prefer to resign from their position rather than not complete their cultural obligations. Now, despite this being recorded in the research, there wasn't any evidence that this had actually occurred. In other research in 2018, Lay et al. Explored factors that negatively impact ATSI worker retention. So the outcome of this research was that in order to increase ATSI worker retention, flexible working arrangements to account for sorry business was actually a really important factor. Regarding theory and gaps in literature for this issue, bereavement theory is quite Western-centric, so as such there's limited information and research around the ATSI experience of this legislation and its impact. It is feasible though that there are economic, cultural and psychological impacts that are quite negative on this population. So from an economic point of view, people might be having to take leave without pay in order to fulfil their cultural obligations, or they may choose to forego their cultural obligations altogether, which would obviously have a cultural impact. And then if they are doing that, that in turn may create cognitive dissonance for those people. So cognitive dissonance theory states that a psychological tension will occur when someone's action is different from their attitude. So we can see that there's potentially quite a significant impact on the ATSI population because of this legislation. So to develop this research question, economic disadvantage, employment rates, high bereavement rates, and the importance of cultural immersion as a protective factor have all been considered. An exploration of these features of the ATSI experience would provide valuable insight in understanding how Western bereavement practice and the resulting short compassionate leave allowances might be affecting ATSI workers. So all of that brings us to the research question. What is the lived experience of ATSI workers regarding Australian compassionate leave legislation? So the methodology is really important for this research. Given there's cultural factors to consider, I'm proposing using a semi-structured interview of around 10 questions. And this methodology would allow for a deeper exploration of the topic and may facilitate a yarning style of communication which is appropriate and familiar to the ATSI community. Another really important aspect of qualitative research is reflexivity, and so this would be incorporated throughout the research in order to understand how both personal and epistemological perspectives might be impacting the design and analysis of the research. It's anticipated that around 8 to 12 participants would provide rich data in exploring this research question. So they would be drawn from the New South Wales health sector. So that's to ensure consistency with the participants' experience of their workplace culture, the workplace policy and legislation. Data would be then analysed using thematic analysis followed by IPA, and that's in order to fully investigate the participants' lived experience of the current legislation. So to summarise, it's been established that the ATSI worker population experiences a high rate of bereavement, and engagement in cultural practice is very important to the well-being of the ATSI population, especially in regard to sorry business. Western bereavement influence means that our current workplace legislation only allows a minimal amount of paid leave for our ATSI workers to attend their sorry business, despite those higher bereavement rates. Future research exploring how these factors interact to potentially disadvantage the ATSI population from an economic, cultural or psychological perspective would be beneficial in understanding how to increase resilience in the ATSI population.